100 years ago, Ignatius Donnelly wrote Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. It is a book that spawned 100 other researchers. It's, it's literally unparalleled. So, in this Book Monkey presentation, we will be going through Ignatius Donnelly's lesser known book, but it's equally profound in implications. This book is called The Destruction of Atlantis, Ragnarok, the Age of Fire and Gravel. And as I've explained in prior presentations, publishers were forcing the word Atlantis onto many titles in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s because it was a bookseller. But this book here has nothing to do with Atlantis. But the contents are going to shock you, especially Archaics veterans who have been following my channel for a long time. You're already going to know that Ignatius Donnelly was in the know. So let's get straight to it. This is the Age of Fire and Gravel. And before I show you actual pages in the book and go through them with you, you need to understand what exactly he's attacking from the beginning of his book. The Ice Age theory is one that is heavily promoted using information from geology called the drift. The drift is the deposit, supposedly they're glacial deposits of boulders, gravel, and clays. And the clays have no fossils. So uniformitarians claim that the drift, the errata, is explained by an ice age when glaciers, the weight of the glaciers were just breaking up all the subsurface materials. And it's a really interesting, scene that they present. The problem that is found is that the drift deposits that we have in the world sometimes are over 100 feet thick of boulders, gravel, and clay, all ground up. And what Ignatius Donnelly brings to our attention is the location of the drift deposits don't make any sense because they're not where ice could have ever been. And where the ice glaciers at a mile and 2 miles high should have been, there are no drift deposits. And Ignatius Donnelly is showing in this book an alternate theory as to where the drift came from. And his theory, backed with much evidence, as I'm going to show, literally proves Ice Age is total BS. And the greatest evidence ever used to promote Ice Age, these drift deposits have nothing to do with glaciation. But what they do basically show us, as we'll see, is that the whole sky fell. An amazing presentation. Ignatius Donnelly, The Age of Fire and Gravel. So Ignatius begins that all the fossils belong to animals which live on land. We find no marine remains. And he's gone through 200 pages of just showing geological report after geological report. His book can be a dry read for some people. But it is absolutely amazing when he is citing on the bottom of the pages. He's always citing his sources, and you can look them up in the bibliography. And he's going through all the scientific material available 100 years ago, and it's a lot. And he's showing that when it comes to the Ice Age deposits, all the fossils belonging to the animals which live on land are found distributed everywhere, but there are no marine remains. Talking about a great flood. If a great flood is what killed all the ancient world, then there would be octopus, whale, shark, tuna, mackerel. There would be other remains as well, mixed in with all these other animals. How come they're all the fossils of the megafauna are all on land? They're all on dry land creatures. It's a very good point. So he says, remember that the drift is unfossiliferous and unstratified, that it fell in mass, and that these remains are found in its lower part or caught between it and the rocks below. And you can form a vivid picture of the sudden and terrific catastrophe. The trees were embedded with man and the animals. The bones of men, smaller and more friable, probably perished, ground up in the tempest, while only their flint implements and the great bones of the larger animals, hard as stones, remained to tell the dreadful story. He's talking about the drift, what is supposed to be Ice Age deposits of large boulders, huge, massive layers of gravel, small, tiny stones, and clay. It's everywhere. He says what we're calling clay actually fell from the sky as a fine powder, and then was pressed down under great weight and moisture. But the drift is unfossiliferous. This massive deposit that the Ice Age glaciologists are claiming were caused by huge glaciers of the Ice Age, this massive deposit that's sometimes 150 feet thick, it's only found in a few places in the world. But where it's found, all the fossils are at the bottom of the drift, and they're all crushed, and they're always distributed amongst boulders, gravel, and clay. The problem is there's human remains have been found underneath the drift, but nothing in the drift has ever been found. Nothing above the drift, unless it's like the last few hundred years or so. So he said, so let's see, we must feel that a body of water with power to move such masses as these must have been very different from any floods now occurring in those valleys. But a flood which could bring down so great a mass would certainly have swept away the comparatively light and movable gravel below. We cannot therefore account for the phenomena by aqueous action, because a flood which would deposit the sandstone blocks would remove the underlying gravel, and a flood which would deposit the gravel would not remove the blocks. The Deus Ex Machina has not only been called in most unnecessarily Ice Age, but when examined turns out to be but an idol after all. So MC D'Aubigny, I guess that's how you pronounce it, observes that all of the fossils found in these beds belong to freshwater or land animals. The sea has had nothing to do with them. And D'Aubigny thinks the drift came from cataclysms. So we have another problem. The Ice Age proponents are claiming the drift is caused by glaciation. But glaciers would have ground all those boulders and gravel and clays into the layers below them. instead of being very neatly stacked on top of the remains of humans, human flints, and megafauna, like a whole surface world completely buried under the drift. And the glaciers were supposed to be on top of those sliding. It doesn't even make sense. But the creationists at the time were arguing that the drift is evidence of the great flood of Noah. So Ignatius Donnelly is bringing a third theory to the table, showing no, the uniformitarians are wrong. Ice Age cannot account for the drift. The creationists are wrong because no saltwater flood could have created the drift when the drift only has freshwater fossils. Two good, really good points. So on page 42, he says, in brief, the drift is not found where ice must have been, and is found where ice could not have been. The conclusion, therefore, is irresistible, that the drift is not due to ice. I think the reader will agree with me that the theory of the glacialists that a world enfolding ice sheet produced them is impossible. To reiterate, they are found on the equator, where the ice sheet could not have been without ending all terrestrial life. They are not found where the ice must have been, in Siberia, in northwestern America, where we found all the frozen megafauna. So we have the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be finding if the uniformitarians are telling us the truth, and that the drift is caused by ice age glacial deposits, and the glaciers fragment and they pass over the land. The problem with this scenario is that the drift is found on the equator, and the drift deposits up to 150 feet thick are not found in Siberia in North America. They're not found there. And that's where the ice caps would have been the greatest. We have the exact opposite to be true that concerning the drift that the uniformitarians need for their theory to be correct. But if the now temperate region of Europe and America was subject to a degree of cold great enough to destroy these huge animals, then there could not have been a tropical climate anywhere on the globe. If the line of 35 degrees or 40 degrees north latitude and south latitude was several degrees below zero, the equator must have been at least below the frost point. This is another good point. The Ice Age model can't stand. It can't stand because if it was true, we wouldn't have all the variety of species surviving today. They're claiming this Ice Age was 10,000 years ago. It can't be true, because we have too many varieties of temperate and tropical species that are still thriving today. They would have never lived in an ice age world. That might be a continuation. Yeah, okay. And if so, how can we account for the survival on the surface? He even thinks that the great mammals, the mammoth and the woolly rhinoceros, may have survived in northern Asia down to a comparatively recent date, ages after they were crushed out of existence by the drift of Europe and America. And that's another good point, because we do have human remains found with the remains of mastodons in Mexico and at the Ohio-Mississippi River mound builder civilization. Think of the significance of all of this. There is no drift in Siberia. There is no till. There is no boulder clay, no stratified masses of gravel, no sand and stones. There was then no drift age in all of northern Asia up to the Arctic Circle, exactly where the uniformitarians must have the drift deposit for their theory to be accurate. Remember, guys, I told you there's never been a scientific consensus on ice age. They all claim there was an ice age, but none of them can agree to how it was even possible. So how pregnant is this admission? It demolishes at one blow the whole theory that the drift came of the ice. For surely, if we could expect to find ice during the so-called glacial age anywhere on the face of our planet, it would be in Siberia. But if there was an ice sheet there, it did not grind up the rocks. It did not striate them. It did not roll the fragments into boulders and pebbles. It rested quietly. And that's not possible under the glaciation thesis. So surviving up to our time, innumerable tropical plants that cannot stand for one instant the breath of frost, and whose fossilized remains are found in the rocks prior to the drift, underneath the drift, not dispersed in the 150 feet thickness of the drift, but underneath the drift. We have all the crushed remains, all the crushed plants, fossils, all this. So as they lived through the glacial age, it could not have been a period of great and intense cold. And this conclusion is in accordance with the results of the latest researches of the scientists. In his valuable studies upon the diluvian flora, Count Gaston de Saporta concludes that the climate in this period was marked rather by extreme moisture than extreme cold. This too is very significant because it's a recent discovery that the woolly rhinoceros and the woolly mammoth, the ice age required that wool to protect them from the Arctic cold, but it's not true. It's come to find out geneticists have done tests, and with all the surviving tissue remains in the frozen specimens of Siberia. Shocker, the woolly mammoth and the woolly rhinoceros were temperate creatures, like Texas to Canada, not Arctic. And the hair was designed to cool them down, because when they sweat underneath the hair and with the wind going through the hair, it would cool their bodies down. Shocker. I love Ignatius Donnelly. I love a thinker. I love a thinking man. Let us reason together. The ice, say the glacialists, caused the drift. What caused the ice? Great rains and snows, they say, falling on the face of the land. Granted, what is rain in the first instance? Well, it's vapor, clouds. Whence are the clouds derived? From the waters of the earth, principally from the oceans. How is the water in the clouds transferred to the clouds from the seas? By evaporation. What is necessary to evaporation? Heat. Here then is the sequence. If there is no heat, there is no evaporation. No evaporation, no clouds. No clouds, no rain. No rain, no ice. No ice, no drift. But as the glacial age meant ice on a stupendous scale, then it must have been preceded by heat on a stupendous scale. What have I been telling you guys? The collapse of the vapor canopy, a world that had just built up in pressure, built up. It was very warm. Plants got huge, animals got huge, people got bigger. It was a very warm, it was like a greenhouse effect. But don't let me tell you, I'm going to let Ignatius Donnelly tell you. We have seen that to produce the phenomena of the glacial age, it was absolutely necessary that it must have been preceded by a period of heat, great enough to vaporize all the streams and lakes and a large part of the ocean. And we have seen that no mere ice hypothesis gives us any clue to the cause of this. Would the comet furnish us with such heat? Let me call another witness to the stand. In the great work of Amidi, I guess that's Guyumin, already cited. Oh, you know what? On the other hand, it seems proved that the light. Okay, this is when he goes into comet theory, because his argument is that the drift came from the sky. But the reason I got the rest of the page down there is because I got I made a note in the margins, but the animals lived. All right, we continue. These great formations of ice did not exist, but none of them pretend to say how the ice came or what caused it. Even Agassiz, the great apostle of the ice origin of the drift, is forced to confess. We have as yet no clue to the source of this great and sudden change of climate. Guys, you'll understand the implications of this statement. Ice Age theory was born in part by the research of Agassiz. This was from the 1870s, and this is what he said, and it's still true today. We have as yet no clue to the source of this great and sudden change of climate. Various suggestions have been made, among others, that formerly the inclination of the Earth's axis was greater, or that a submersion of the continents under water might have produced a decided increase of cold. But none of these explanations are satisfactory, and science has yet to find any cause which accounts for all the phenomena connected to it. There are still 59 different Ice Age theories because they can't agree how Ice Age was even possible. Louis Figuier says, we cannot doubt, after such testimony, of the existence in the frozen north of almost entire remains of the mammoth. The animals seem to have perished suddenly, enveloped in ice at the moment of their death. Their bodies have been preserved from decomposition by the continual action of the cold up until this day. Cuvier wrote, if they had not been frozen as soon as killed, putrefaction would have decomposed them. And so, on the other hand, this eternal frost could not have previously prevailed in the place where they died, for they could not have lived in such a temperature. It was, therefore, at the same instant when these animals perished that the country they inhabited was rendered glacial. It was in an instant. These events must have been sudden, instantaneous, and without any gradation. Remember, buttercups on the lips of the mammoths. It was instantaneous. There is abundant evidence that the drift fell upon the land covered with forests, and that the trunks of the trees. This is where you get your polystrate fossils. I didn't continue that because it was only like one or two more words left. We saw the trunks of the trees are sticking straight up. Something fell and just took the branches all down, leaving the trees like poles sticking in the ice. Volcanoes are always found on seashores or on islands. Why? Through breaks in the earth, the seawater finds its way occasionally down upon the breast of the molten mass. It is at once converted into gas, steam, and as it expands, it blows itself out through the escape pipe of the volcano. Precisely as the gas formed by the gunpowder coming in contact with the fire of the percussion cap, it drives the ball out before it through the same passage by which it had entered. Hence, someone has said, no water, no volcano. Ignatius Donnelly presents the case that whatever happened when the drift appeared, volcanoes were involved as well. Vulcan is nothing but another name for Phoenix. So right here, Ignatius wrote, "These then, good reader, to recapitulate, are points that seem to be established." This is well after he made his case. The drift marked a world-convulsing catastrophe. It was a gigantic and terrible event. It was something quite out of the ordinary course of nature's operations. It was sudden and overwhelming. Let us turn to the next question. Was it an extraordinary event, a world-shaking cataclysm? The answer to this question is plain. The drift marks probably the most awful convulsion and catastrophe that has ever fallen upon the globe. The deposit of these continental masses of clay, sand, and gravel was but one of the features of this appalling event. Ignatius Donnelly presents the horrid picture. Imagine you're living in a Garden of Eden type world. Everything grows, it's beautiful. And then all of the sudden, the sky fractures like glass. Iceberg-sized pieces of frozen oxygen just come straight down and kill all kinds of things. But there's no evidence of them later because they're frozen, they melt. But behind these ice shards of the sky is a rain of boulders, a rain of gravel, and a rain of fine dust. So a lot of it's red dust, and it doesn't fall all over the whole. Some places in the world are totally untouched, but a lot of it falls in southern Europe, over the Mediterranean, over northern Africa. A lot of it falls in the Pacific Atlantic. A lot of it covers America, but not far North America. It's called the drift, and it's the day the sky fell. It's the reason why when the Sumerians were asked what is it they feared, because Alexander the Great, he marched north, and he was met with the Scythian culture called the Sumerians, and they were tall, they were fearless. It was Darius of Persia. Darius of Persia sent a delegation. He was going to attack the north, then decided against it. But the Persians asked the Scythians, "What is it you fear?" And they say nothing except that the sky might fall upon our heads. Yeah, if I had a cultural memory of the sky falling like that, the Judeo-Christian version is the Great Flood, and it was just water that fell from the sky. That is not what the ancient legends and traditions convey. They convey an apocalypse of the magnitude of a whole land mass falling out of the sky. It's far worse than rain. Let's continue with Mr. Donnelly. He's got some great stuff here. I'm really trying to get you guys to order this book. A lot of you need to read this book. This book is fantastic. So concerning the drift and the people who have done excavations and bore wells and all that, Ignatius Donnelly goes to pointing out the different fossils, evidence of humans, human bone fragments and skulls, and even artifacts that have all been found underneath the drift. Here is a copper coin found 114 feet underground in Illinois. In the state of Louisiana, on Petite Anse Island, remarkable discoveries have been made. At considerable depths below the surface of the earth, 15 to 20 feet, immediately overlying the salt rocks and underneath what Dr. Foster believes to be the equivalent of the drift in Europe, associated with the bones of elephants and other huge extinct quadrupeds. Incredible quantities of pottery were found. Humans and the giant quadrupeds, the mastodons and the mammoths and the woolly rhinos and the tree sloths all live together. and they were all buried together underneath the drift. And remember, the drift has no saltwater marine life forms. The drift was not caused by the Great Flood or any Great Flood. There's no evidence of saltwater inundation. It's all land-based flora and fauna underneath the drift. Cases, these remains of pottery formed veritable strata 3 and 6 inches thick. In many cases, the bones of the mastodon were found above these strata of pottery. Fragments of baskets and matting were also found. Mastodons are found under the drift underneath layers of pottery. Human civilization was thriving. The drift may have fallen upon a city that has already been abandoned and old. Look out at the scene around you. Here are trees 50 feet high. Imagine an instantaneous descent of granite, sand, and gravel sufficient to smash and crush these trees to the ground, to bury their trunks, and to cover the earth 100 to 500 feet higher than the elevation to which their tops now reach. And this not alone here in your garden or over your farm or over your township or over your country or over your state, but over the whole continent in which you dwell. In short, over the greater part of the habitable world. You can't survive that. If 50-foot trees are buried and the tops of those trees are 400 feet underneath the new surface world, because gravel's heavy, and gravel falling from the sky would strip all the trees. Every one of those trees would be stripped of their branches, stripped of their bark, all the way down. They would remain as polystrate fossils. All the silts and the powders and the gravel would leach all the way down to the bottom as it was all followed by rain. Very fast, it would create a whole new land surface. This is what we have shown in Archaics. 2 miles below the surface of Heavener, Oklahoma, was a city found by coal miners. 3 different incidents as documented in Archaics, 3 different times in the historical record. Miners have opened up caverns, or one of them was a mudslide and it exposed the ship. But wooden ships have been found entombed underneath mountains. How is that possible? How are wooden ships found underneath mountains? Also, the Nampa figurine found 600 feet below Idaho. Many fossils, forbidden archaeology. I don't want to pollute this video with all that material, but we have many videos in Archaics where we show fossils that have been found in North America buried to extreme depths, showing that the entire area of North America was buried in something. Ignatius Donnelly is telling us what it was. At Bloomington, Illinois, pieces of wood were found 123 feet below the surface in a sinking shaft. And it is a very remarkable fact that none of these Illinois clays contain any fossils. There's the Christian model out. It's not a great flood of Noah. It's the exact same event. But what actually happened? It was the day the sky fell. And whatever's up there in the sky, it rained down on our world. The inference, therefore, is irresistible that the clay, thus unfossiliferous, fell upon and enclosed the trees while they were yet growing. These facts alone would dispose of the theory that the drift was deposited upon lands already covered with water. It is evident, on the contrary, that it was dry land, inhabited land, land embowered in forests. On top of Norwich Crag in England are found the remains of an ancient forest, showing stumps of trees standing erect with their roots penetrating an ancient soil. In this soil occur the remains of many extinct species of animals, together with those of others still living. Among these may be mentioned the hippopotamus, 3 species of elephant, the mammoths, rhinoceros, bear, horse, the Irish elk. These are in the United Kingdom, in Britain. In Ireland, remains of trees have been found in sand beds below the till. What's being described here is not a flood of water. It was a flood of gravel and silt or dust that became silt and clay. It fell upon land areas, much like our own geographical conformation, a forest-covered, inhabited land, a glorious land basking in perpetual summer in the midst of a golden age. The vapor canopy world died. In the first place, the drift fell upon a fair and lovely world, a world far better adapted to give happiness to its inhabitants than this storm-tossed planet on which we now live, with its endless battle between heat and cold, between sun and ice. The pre-glacial world was a garden, a paradise, not excessively warm at the equator, and yet with so mild and equable a climate that the plants we now call tropical flourished within the present Arctic Circle. Can't make this shit up. So what I like about Ignatius is he goes straight into, once he makes his case about the drift, he goes straight into the legends and the lore and what our ancestors said and preserved. Because that's what he did with Atlantis, the antediluvian world. His book is fantastic. And now he leaves all the scientifica out and he goes straight with human memory now. He's quoting Hesiod, 800 BC, when Hesiod said, "And night bear also hateful destiny, and black fate, and death, and nemesis." Phoenix is a daughter of Nemesis. We will find legend after legend about this Typhon, the Phoenix. He runs through the mythologies of different nations, and as to his size and his terrible power, they all agree he was no earth creature. He moved in the air. He reached the skies. According to Pindar, the head of Typhon reached to the stars. His eyes darted fire. His hands extended from the east to the west. Terrible serpents were twined about the middle of his body, and 100 snakes took the place of fingers on his hands. Between him and the gods, there was a dreadful war. Jupiter finally killed him with a flash of lightning and buried him under Mount Etna, a volcano. Another link to Vulcan. Here's the Scandinavian word Ragnarok. Ignatius says the very name is significant. According to Professor Anderson's etymology of the word, it means the darkness of the gods. From Regn, gods, and Rocker, darkness. But it may more properly be derived from the Icelandic Danish, in Swedish Regn, a rain, and rock, smoke or dust, and it may mean the rain of dust, for the clay came first as dust. It is described in some Indian legends as ashes. What? That's the Phoenix. What am I always showing you about? When the Phoenix appears, this red dust blankets our world. He cites Ovid. He says the story too is that even Nereus himself and Doris, his wife, and their daughters lay hid in the heated caverns. That's exactly what we find with Derinkuyu in Turkey. And there's 58 or 59 underground cities in Turkey. And the legends attached to them is that they were specifically built so that humans could survive a coming catastrophe. And they did survive because we're still here today. Remember, Nereus was the personification of the Anunnaki number 600, which was Ner. Noah lived, and in his 600th year was the Great Flood. But as we're finding, it wasn't the Great Flood of water. That was only Middle Earth. The Mediterranean was the only area that flooded with water. The rest of the world, it was a flood of dust and gravel. It would have been terrifying. If you were still on the surface, it would have been terrifying. You can survive water. You're not going to survive a gravel rain, not unless you're under some really good buildings with those. But even though, but when gravel stacks up at 500 feet thick, you're not going to survive that. In the Codex Quimalpopoca, one of the sacred books of the Toltecs, the author, speaking of the destruction which took place by fire, says the third sun or era is called don't give me the line, Tonatiuh, the son of rain, because there fell a rain of fire, all which existed burned, and there fell a rain of gravel. An ancient Toltec text, not a mythology, but what they're claiming happened to the ancient world. A rain of gravel. Again, on page 167, Ignatius Donnelly says there was a rain of gravel, quoting the ancient Mexican manuscript. The drift fell from the comet. Again, the comet is just a descriptor for an unknown celestial object. In the Persian Zendavesta, we have Zohak, the biting snake of winter. He is also known as Python. He is Typhon. He is also the Fenris wolf. He is the Midgard serpent. The reason Zohak is regarded as the biting snake of winter is because Phoenix in 2239 BC collapsed the vapor canopy world, and what followed was a very cold spell. In Chapter 7, Legends of the Cave Life, Ignatius wrote, I have shown that man could only have escaped the fire, the poisonous gases, and the falling stones and clay dust by taking refuge in the water or in the deep caves of the earth. And hence, everywhere in the ancient legends we find the races claiming that they came up out of the earth. Man was earthborn. The Toltecs and the Aztecs trace back their origin to the 7 caves. We have seen the ancestors of the Peruvians emerging from the primeval cave, Pacarin Tempu, and the Aztec taking refuge in a cave. A North American tribe, a branch of the Tenna of British America, have a legend that the earth existed first in a chaotic state, with only one human inhabitant, a woman who dwelt in a cave and lived on berries. She met one day a mysterious animal, like a dog, who transformed himself into a handsome young man, and they became the parents of the giant race. The Navajos, living north of the Pueblos, say that at one time all the nations, Navajos, Pueblos, Coyoteros, and white people, lived together underground in the heart of a mountain near the river San Juan. Their food was meat, which they had in abundance, for all kinds of game were closed up with them in their caves. But their light was dim and only endured for a few hours each day. In the Aztec creation myths, according to the accounts furnished by mnjedi and derived from Fray Andres de Olmos, one of the earliest of the Christian missionaries among the Mexicans, we have the following legend of the return of the sun. Now, there had been no sun in existence for many years, so the gods, being assembled in a place called Teotihuacan, 6 leagues from Mexico, and gathered at the time around a great fire, told their devotees that he of them who should first cast himself into that fire should have the honor of being transformed into the sun. So,
One of them, called Nanawasin, flung himself into the fire. Then the gods, or the chiefs, began to peer through the gloom in all directions for the expected light. This is really profound. There had been no sun in existence for many years. And in the Phoenix phenomenon presentations I've given in the past, I have shown you that one of the human Bronze Age institutions that was very popular was human sacrifice. They were trying to thwart the whole return of the Phoenix, and so that the sun would remain safe in the sky. And when we turn to the traditions of the kindred and more ancient race, the Toltecs, we find that after the fall of the fire from heaven, the people emerging from the 7 caves wandered 104 years, and suffering from nakedness, hunger, and cold over many lands, across expanses of sea, and through untold hardships, precisely as narrated in the foregoing pathetic prayer. What's interesting here is that 104 years is 52 plus 52, the ancient Aztec, Toltec, Mayan calendar round. The date the Toltecs gave the flood was the year 1716, whereas in the Hebrew it's 1656. But 1656 is not divisible by 52. So the Toltecs stuck to their holy number of 52, the calendar round. Therefore, 33 times 52 is 1716. This is the Toltec age, because they knew that the Great Flood was in the 33rd period, but they had already lost how long a Jubilee was, because 1656 is 33 Jubilees. So they had preserved the accuracy, but not the actual number of years. And then 104 years of wandering after the flood is 52 plus 52 again. And then in the 520th year after the flood is the Tower of Babel and the giants, according to the Toltec version, which is 52 times 10. The celebration of the May Day, with its ceremonies, the Maypole, its May Queen, etc., is a survival of the primeval thanksgiving with which afflicted mankind welcomed the return of the sun from his long sleep of death. In Norway, during the Middle Ages, the whole scene was represented in these May Day festivals. One man represents summer. He is clad in green leaves, and the other represents winter. He is clad in straw. And I found this particularly interesting because I just released recently my Merry Merry Month of May video, where I was showing the Phoenix phenomenon always happens in May, and I had not yet read Ragnarok, Age of Fire and Gravel by Ignatius Donnelly. So I found this really interesting. Hence, they marked, as far as they were able, the positions of the comets, that they might not again do injury and not trouble anyone. He's talking about the Near Eastern cuneiform tablets. The word here given is Nibiru, which Mr. Smith says does not mean planet, and in the above account, Nibiru is contradistinguished from the stars. They have already been arranged in constellations, hence it can only mean comets. But this is just, Ignatius Donnelly being a product of the times. This is before Zecharia Sitchin's research and revelations bringing to the public attention Nibiru. So I have divulged in Archaics to my community a book from 1900 that discusses Nibiru in detail and how scholars were arguing over the fact that it couldn't possibly be a planet or Jupiter, that it was an unknown object. He seems to agree with that here. What's really profound, though, is that he says the tablet continues. It proceeds with the distinct references to the age of darkness. This is always brought on by the Phoenix. The sun appearing after the darkness, Ignatius writes, here we have the victory of Osiris over Seb, of Adonis over Typhon, which is the Phoenix, of Balder over Hoder, Indra over Vitra. And among the Greeks and ancient Germans, the fiery dragon was the dispenser of riches and watches a treasure in the earth. These legends may be explained by the fact that in the Ural Mountains on the east of Europe, in South America, in South Africa, and in other localities, the drift gravels contain gold and precious stones. The diamond is found in drift gravels alone. It is pure carbon crystallized. Man has been unable to reproduce it, except in minute particles, nor can he tell in what laboratory of nature it has been fabricated. It is not found in situ in any of the rocks of an earth origin. I don't know how accurate that is, but I do know that diamond mining is on the surface, unlike other gemstones, so that's really interesting. Did diamonds fall from the sky? Here, Ignatius is talking about the creation account in Genesis. God divided the light from the darkness, and there was morning and evening on the first, second, and third days, while the sun, moon, and stars, we are told, were not created until the fourth day. And grass and fruit trees were made before the sun. This is very intriguing. It shows that the creation event is not a creation at all, because all these things pre-existed. Something else happened. And in our case, we have shown exactly what that was. The Typhon appeared, Phoenix, and caused the Adam and Eve Genesis reset. It began year one of the pre-flood world with a destruction so terrible, it was a new heavens and a new earth. Again, he reiterates, how is it could there be night and day and vegetation without a sun? That's easy. It's a vapor canopy world. But 100 years ago, Ignatius Donnelly had not come into contact with the vapor canopy research. So he continues, but where were they? Talking about the sun, moon, and stars. Why did they not appear? What obscured them? What could obscure them but dense clouds? Where did the clouds come from? They were vaporized water. What vaporized the water and caused this darkness on the face of the deep, so dense that the sun, moon, and stars did not appear until the world had clothed itself with the sun and the drift? These are very, very compelling statements. Ignatius Donnelly has made his case that the Ice Age is lacking. It just didn't happen. And all the evidence has been systematically completely overturned, but they're not rewriting the books, such as the megafauna. The megafauna were evidence that the ice ages were true. Then it was found out that the megafauna biology supported a temperate environment, and they were living in a temperate to tropical environment when the ice fell. In the destruction of Atlantis, Ragnarok, the age of fire and gravel, Ignatius Donnelly shows us that the evidence of ice ages called the drift, 150 to 500 feet high, mountains of gravel, pebbles, and clay, do not have fossils, were not created by glaciation, but fell from the sky.